Hi, Tony and I want to welcome you to our study in the parables. Today we're going to look at the most famous parable of all, the parable of the Good Samaritan. I read a story years ago about a professor of a Eastern, very prestigious divinity school, and he asked 3 of his students to speak in chapel. I had a chance to speak in chapel when I was in seminary, and it is a high honor to get a chance to speak to the faculty and students. At any rate, he gave them a topic, and it was the parable of the Good Samaritan. On the day they were supposed to preach, he also hired an actor who dressed up like a homeless person, smelly and all of that, and he was placed in the way of these men as they were going to chapel. You can guess it, they all 3 walked right past him. Every time I read the parable of the Good Samaritan, I ask myself, I wonder what I would have done when I was headed to preach at seminary when I was there, if I'd been preaching on the Good Samaritan or just preaching, period. What about you? Well, this parable was used, as all parables, to shock, to startle, to confront, because Jesus intends that we change our behavior. So it's one thing, like the seminary students, to have the right answers. It's another thing to do the right thing, and that's the key. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little question and answer thing here. The whole setting of the parable of the Good Samaritan took place as a lawyer asked Jesus questions, and Jesus in return gave him some answers and asked him some questions. So we're going to bounce back and forth. I'm going to be the lawyer. Tony's going to be Jesus, which is, you're a lot better than me, so you ought to be Jesus in this, all right? First question, the lawyer. Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?
Jesus, what is written in the law? What do you read there?
Here's the answer. Well, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.
You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live.
Aha. But the lawyer has another question. And who is my neighbor?
A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, Take care of him, and when I come back I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?
And the lawyer answered, we all answered, the one who showed him mercy.
Jesus said, Go and do likewise.
There you go. So think about the divinity students. They knew the right answer. Now that they knew this parable. We know this parable, and probably people who listen to this video know the parable. But there can be some questions about how well we know it based on our behavior. Here's the basic question that was being asked. Are there boundaries to our love? Are there places where we can say, I've done my best, I've done all I need to do, and I don't need to do any more? So here's some questions that come out of the encounter between Jesus and the lawyer. Do we only help our kind? A man who's lying by the side of the road may not be identified as someone who belonged to the race of people that were connected with the priest and the Levite. Do you help our kind? Do we not help people who are obviously not righteous? I think about the people who are standing on the corners in our day, who have their sign out. The guys I know call that flying the flag. Do we make a judgment on them and say, nope, I'm not going to help? There's some people in our church like Scott and Don Stoner and their friends who find those people to be their friends. And there's some great stories that came out of that from their lives. The next question is, do I choose to not help when it might be risky or dangerous? Now, risky for the Levite and for the priest was that if that man was dead, if they touched him, they'd be unclean. And obviously there were bandits in the area, they could be harmed. The basic question is to define in advance where and who we will love and who will not love. Let me state that again. It is to define in advance. I'm going to make up my mind. These are the kind of people I'm going to help, and those other people I'm not going to help. Well, the priest and the Levite were both people of prayer. In fact, they had a special prayer called the Shema Israel that they prayed twice a day. The Samaritan was racially and socially seen to be inferior. We could talk a lot about how Samaritans were thought of in that day. Here's the interesting thing. Let me give you a play on words. The priest was going down. The Levite came to the place. That's how Jesus told it. But the Samaritan saw him and was moved with pity. Let's think about our connection with people. Who do we see? Who do we really care about? Who do we help? Well, God doesn't put boundaries. You probably gathered that, and neither should we. So how do we get moved to action? What I'd like to do is, Tony and I are going to read back and forth again. These are some questions you might want to ask yourself as we ask ourselves to, again, take Jesus' word and shock us and prod us and confront us to change our behavior. So here's a question to prayerfully ask. Is there a boundary where I can say that I have completed my obligation to love and I don't need to do any more?
Can we limit our love to our kind of person? Can we place limits that define who is our neighbor and who is not one?
Is it true that while we cannot define our neighbor, all of us can be a neighbor to those we meet?
Is our identity, that is who we really are, defined by the love of God and love of our neighbor?
So when people came to Jesus, they would ask him, what do I have to do? Jesus would in turn ask them, what kind of person are you? How we answer this question will reveal a lot about us.
Since God is love, does love describe our character and nature?
Does the love command actually override all other commands in the Bible?
Can I say to God, I met my obligation to love you and others, and I can quit now, can't I?
Can I truly know God and yet not be conformed to the loving being that he is? I hope you'll think through these questions. If you want to, you can go to real-voices.com and there will be a list of those, and I'll have the typo that Tony stumbled over fixed in that. Thanks for being a part today. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.